It's so sad because it's always the organisation that benefits from this unmet expectation that they're constantly hyping up of this Armageddon that's never coming. This Armageddon that means that conveniently for them, they need the time and energy of their millions of followers to help them build a real estate empire. How convenient that Armageddon means that they need to build stuff that's worth something using volunteer labour. How convenient, David explained, but how tragic that no one actually stops and puts two and two together and thinks, hang on a minute, this is like a broken record. I've heard this story before. Hello there, I'm Lloyd Evans. Welcome to The Attic. In this video, I'll be sharing my thoughts on the March 2025 JW Broadcasting episode, which is hosted by governing body helper Joel Dellinger. Now, there is, as always, quite a lot to get through, so without further ado, let's roll the first clip.
In today's world, many people are seeking great things for themselves as they pursue secular education and secular work. Many believe that the key to success and the key to their and their family's happiness involves money and getting more material things, or a resting place in this system of things. Such thinking could influence us. If you're a family head, consider Chibisa. He's a brother in Malawi who, along with his wife and 7 children, were doing well spiritually. However, at one point, they faced financial problems. At times, there was not enough money to buy food for each day. How stressful. Like many others, Chibisa decided to go to South Africa to find work. That was a personal decision. But was it wise? Looking back, Chibisa said this: "This affected me spiritually because I did not know the language. I was unable to preach, and I did not benefit from the meetings. Being so far from my family caused me to neglect my responsibility as a family head. As a result, my family grew weak spiritually, and we all missed each other very much. I realized that I had made a wrong decision going abroad. My conscience started to trouble me greatly." You parents must also make personal decisions about secular education for your children. Naturally, you want them to get a good education, but you have to think carefully about potential dangers. For example, in some countries, parents send their young children away to boarding schools. The March 15, 1997 issue of The Watchtower discussed the scriptural principles involved and related a number of experiences highlighting the dangers. A brother named Clement said that before going away to boarding school, he loved the truth and enjoyed participating in the ministry, in family worship, and at meetings. However, he said, "Once I went into boarding school at the age of 14, I left the truth completely. Throughout the 5 years I spent in boarding school, I never attended meetings. As a result of bad company, I got involved with drugs, smoking, and heavy drinking."
Oh dear, poor Clement. So we've just been hearing some cautionary tales about education and pursuing a secular education and a secular career from Joel Dellinger. You can see where this is going. Again, this is the March 2025 JW Broadcasting episode, and Joel Dellinger really doubles down on the organization's anti-higher education position. He also is dealing here with personal decisions. He uses that wording a lot, personal decisions, but it's very clear from the way he expresses himself that a personal decision can be a wrong decision. In which case, does it really make any difference whether it's a personal decision or a decision that's being made for the individual by the organization, which is how we know it really is? a decision is either right or wrong in the eyes of God to a Jehovah's Witness. So what difference does it make calling it a personal decision? I think they're just trying to play it safe. He's just kind of covering all his bases to make it sound like this is a decision that everyone's agreed upon, when of course it isn't. It's just something that is being enforced. And a good example is when he gives the story of Chabisa, this man from Malawi who travels to South Africa, as many do in poor countries. They need to work abroad for a period to provide for their families. And this is being frowned upon by the organization, because fathers in particular who do this aren't able to be spiritual heads for their families. In other words, they're not able to make sure their families stay on track with their religion. There's a higher possibility that the children might not make it as believing Jehovah's Witnesses. So what you have here is the organization very clearly putting its own interests ahead of the interests of its worshippers. And then you have this weird story about Clement from a 1997 watchtower, 28 years ago, folks. Because I was listening to this story thinking, why are they talking about boarding schools? You know, what world are we living in now? Are we in some kind of Harry Potter situation? I'm personally not aware of anybody from my Jehovah's Witness past who either went to boarding school or was in a situation where they felt pressured to go to a boarding school. But they just invent this bogeyman, this problem, by dredging up a 28-year-old story.
Let's consider one more situation. You younger Christians approaching adulthood must make decisions involving education and employment. There may be many choices, but which ones will help you live up to your dedication to Jehovah? One sister said this: "As a baptized witness, I had read and heard about the dangers of pursuing university education, but I dismissed such warnings. I thought that counsel did not apply to me." Well, our sister made a personal choice in the matter, but was it a wise one? She continues, "Studying for my courses took so much time and effort that I was too busy to linger in prayer to Jehovah the way I used to, too exhausted to enjoy Bible discussions with others, and too tired to prepare well for the meetings. Thankfully, once I realized that being immersed in higher education was damaging my relationship with Jehovah, I knew I had to stop, and I did." Of what do these real-life examples remind us? In Satan's system of things, we will face challenges that test our determination to put Jehovah's will first in our lives. Like Barak, personal desires could distract us. If that ever happens, we need to take quick action to correct our viewpoint, as did Barak. Happily, through the Bible and spiritual instruction from the faithful slave, Jehovah helps us make better choices in personal areas of life, such as those involving secular education and secular work. At Psalm 32:8, he promises, "I will give you insight and instruct you in the way you should go. I will give you advice with my eye upon you." We are wise to seek out such advice by doing research, by talking to mature Christians, and then applying such counsel.
I hope you've noticed that twice now Joel Dellinger has referred to secular education and secular work.
As they pursue secular education and secular work, Jehovah helps us make better choices in personal areas of life, such as those involving secular education and secular work.
Think about what that means. All you really have, if we're being honest, are work or employment, which is what most of us think of when we think of work, or education. It's not secular education, it's education. But they need to insert the word secular because, of course, they feel they are in the business of giving people education. And they are very much in the business of giving people work. It's just that you don't get paid for it. Or if you are perhaps a Bethelite, you get a small monthly stipend. But let's be real for a moment. Real work pays you. But work as a Jehovah's Witness doesn't. Real education educates you and prepares you for a career and the ability to provide for both yourself and others, whereas an education or indoctrination as a Jehovah's Witness serves only the organization. That's what this is really about. And that's why I feel so strongly, as I'm sure many of you watching this do, that the position on higher education is so disgusting. I really do struggle to hold it together when, again, I hear him talking about personal choices. And we even heard him say there that you can have a personal choice or make a personal choice, but is it a wise choice?
Well, our sister made a personal choice in the matter, but was it a wise one?
So straight away, Jehovah's Witnesses have permission to pry into other people's lives and see the choices they are making, personal choices that they are making, and comment on them. Because that's what Joel Dellinger is repeatedly doing here. He's reading real-life experiences. Of course, most of them are probably made up, but he's reading about actual people. And then he's casting judgment on their stories using either the individual's own words or his own comments on the personal choices that they've made. And he's saying, ultimately, a personal choice doesn't matter whether it's personal or not. What matters is whether it's a wise choice, whether it's a correct choice from the point of view of the organization. And isn't it interesting that the correct choice or wise choice is always the one that benefits the organization, even if it comes at the expense of the individual?
I worked in an office in the financial district. I enjoyed everything about working there. Passing these tall skyscrapers, institutions with big names. In terms of what I wanted from life, at that time it was great. Spiritually, it was not the best at all. You have to make yourself stand out. That really, affected my personality. I didn't even realize it at the time. I was pioneering, and I decided to apply for Bethel and was accepted. And my assignment was to do cleaning. And from my background, that kind of work, it was something that was looked down on. It's not something you would choose to do. I was used to an environment where if you did well, you could move to the next step and you'd be recognized for it. And this was the case for me, that I derived so much value from these external things, these privileges, and being set apart from others. I thrived on that commendation, both at work and in the congregation. So when you don't get it, then you feel lost a little bit. Other brothers were getting more recognition. And that just played in my head a little bit. The spiritual environment in Bethel has taught me and is teaching me that our value is nothing to do with the privileges that we enjoy. When we feed off the recognition from men, it's almost like we're chasing the next compliment or the next praise. You can always feel like you're chasing happiness. But, switching my thinking to thinking about Jehovah's recognition, it gives you more peace and it's more sustainable. And it really helped me to see that no matter what circumstances I'm in, I can be happy, I can be joyful. It's been good molding. Yeah.
Avinash there talking about being molded by his experience as a Bethelite for Jehovah's Witnesses. And if you don't know anything about Jehovah's Witnesses, a Bethelite is essentially someone who works at the organization's facilities for almost nothing. I mean, they do get a small stipend, $100, $200, $300 per month. I don't know what the exact figure is, but they're essentially working for free. They're just having some token money given to them. It's certainly putting the skids on someone's career to go to Bethel. And here we have a young man who has a fantastic future ahead of him, at least to begin with, because he's all set up for a career in finance. But one of his complaints about that career in finance, which could have led to great success and prosperity for him and for any family that he ends up having, is you have to make yourself stand out.
You have to make yourself stand out. That really, affected my personality.
That's apparently a terrible thing. To stand out. How dare you stand out? Isn't it interesting that once you're in the organization, you are allowed to stand out so long as you happen to be a governing body member? That's all about standing out. I mean, you can't get away from them, can you? In the JW broadcasting era. And I'm also including, by the way, certain governing body helpers. They are really front center. They very much stand out. But it's interesting that when the caption goes up, we're shown Avinash's name. It just says Bethelite. So in other words, he doesn't really have any specific privilege. It's not like he's part of any committee in Bethel. He's literally, it seems, just involved in doing housekeeping, in doing cleaning. And look, if that's what his goal, what his passion is, then fine, go for it. But what's really happening, of course, I think we can all see straight through this, is that his indoctrination as a Jehovah's Witness is being used against him to exploit him. Avinash is being made to believe that the only way he can have any worth as an individual is to be nothing, is to let go of any kind of ambition, any kind of dream of success, any dream of standing out and being noticed for his competence or for his skill in something, and he needs to just disappear. And isn't that what is required of almost all of the rank and file? It's the job of a rank and file Jehovah's Witness to be invisible and expend all their time and energy making the governing body stand out.
Let's see how Bible principles influence the career decisions of two young publishers.
Why was it difficult to choose a career?
Most of my family have a university degree. Some are lawyers, engineers, accountants, and so on. So they expected me to go to university as well. They told me, "We don't have a doctor in the family yet. We think you should study medicine."
When I was 16, I was about to leave high school. Many of my schoolmates were planning to study at university and would say things like, "I want to go to this school. Which one are you going to?" I felt a lot of pressure to get a higher education. My teachers told me that I needed to continue my studies if I really wanted to make money.
I wanted to be a teacher, but there was so much pressure from my family to study something that would allow me to have a higher salary.
There were times when I felt overwhelmed because of the pressure. Even after I graduated from high school, a teacher contacted me to make sure that I was planning to go to university and, in his words, actually become someone in this world.
I started a 6-year psychology degree at university. And at the same time, I was studying for a teacher certificate on the weekends. And on top of all of that, I was working part-time. I was trying to do everything.
What helped you make a good decision?
I spoke with my mom about what I should do. She helped me to think about some of the dangers I would be exposed to at university, things that could endanger me in a spiritual sense.
After about 2 years, it became clear that I couldn't continue with such a busy routine. I needed to make a change. I remembered some advice I got from a friend. He had studied to become an accountant when he was young, but now he sells chilies. He jokingly said, "So now I'm counting chilies, so I guess you could say that it is what I studied." He explained that many people end up in jobs that have nothing to do with their university degree.
Philippians 1:10 helped me. It says that we should make sure of the more important things. I knew that finding a job was important, but it was more important that I had time for Jehovah.
Well, isn't that what this is all about? Jehovah comes first. Your own career, your own prosperity, your own financial security will always, always come second when it comes to the religion and your obligations and commitments to the religion. But what really sickens me in this segment in the March 2025 JW Broadcasting episode is the manipulation. So we have this segment called Reasons for Faith, Choosing Your Career. We have these two individuals, Livia and Geordie, and lots of young Jehovah's Witnesses will be basing their career choices and their education choices off what these two young Jehovah's Witnesses are saying, and they in turn have been cherry-picked by the organization as role models, completely ignoring the many examples that I'm sure there will be of people raised in Jehovah's Witness families who have pursued higher education and their lives have been better as a result and easier and more prosperous. But you get all of these myths and, you know, all of this fear-mongering. Oh, if you go to college or university, you'll end up taking drugs. Well, I'm sure that's true in many cases, but it's true in life in general. Depends who you hang out with. There are lots of people who go to college and university who are absolutely against drugs. I promise you that. And we also have this argument that many who go to university or college don't end up in a job or profession that has anything to do with the qualification that they studied for. Well, that again will be true in some cases. It's as though they just create this completely unreasonable expectation and use that as an argument, as though going to college and university means it's set in stone that you're going to succeed, as though it means you are absolutely definitely going to be able to do the job that you're aiming for. Of course not. It improves your chances considerably, especially for some jobs where it's absolutely required that you have some level of college or university education. But there are no guarantees in life, but they just create this impossible expectation and use that to manipulate young people into thinking there is no point in pursuing higher education.
I've always loved Jehovah's promise at Matthew 6:33, where he says that he will make sure we have what we need if we keep seeking first the kingdom and his righteousness. I had already seen this promise come true in my life, so I trusted that Jehovah would continue to provide for me.
I knew that if I studied at university, I would be losing valuable time during my youth, time that I could be using for Jehovah.
Sometimes we have many different options in front of us, or we know that we need to adjust our course. That's when looking to Bible principles can help us to choose the right path.
My father has a barbershop, and he offered to teach me how to be a barber. My parents told me, people will always need a haircut. So even though I knew I wouldn't be making millions as a barber, it was work that would always be in demand.
I decided to leave university halfway through my degree and look for part-time teaching work. During that time, I prayed so much, asking Jehovah to bless my decision.
What benefits have come from your decisions?
I'm my own boss. I work in a barber shop and also travel to people's homes and give them haircuts. I have the freedom to decide the days and hours that I work.
Jehovah answered my prayers. I was able to find part-time work teaching at a school, which allows me to be in full-time service, along with my husband.
Because of the flexibility I have with my work, I enjoy opportunities to participate in construction projects for the organization. I've seen clearly that by focusing on what's most important, Jehovah has blessed me.
I continue to see the fulfillment of Matthew 6:33 in my life. Jehovah has always provided what I needed.
If you're having trouble choosing the right type of work, consider talking to others about how they chose jobs that allow them to actively serve Jehovah.
I'm having trouble holding it together after that disgusting propaganda that's been crafted to persuade an entire generation of young Jehovah's Witnesses that they shouldn't pursue higher education, because think of how much time it will take away from your service to Jehovah. Again, the religion always comes first, doesn't it? Over the needs and interests of the individual. That's what's most important. And I couldn't help but notice the irony in the case of Livia, because she ends up getting the best of both worlds. She's a part-time teacher. I couldn't be a part-time teacher. If you just go through a regular education without doing any higher education, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think most countries will require teachers to do at least some higher education. So what Livia has by the end of it, I would argue, is the best of both worlds. You know, she is literally picking up a paycheck that is higher than it would be if she hadn't done at least some higher education, which is the whole point of her participation in this video, is to turn young people away from higher education. But what appalling reasoning and manipulation. So these two young Jehovah's Witnesses are complaining about pressure that they've received from family, from schoolmates, pressure from teachers, pressure to do well in life. And nowhere do we talk about the pressure that's coming from the organization to throw away your career, to throw away your prospects, and just devote all of your time for free to promoting the governing body.
Worship extends beyond the ministry into our personal lives, particularly within the home. If you're married, note how you and your mate can continue working together as a team to maintain a happy marriage.
With so much that needs to get done in a day, every day, married couples can struggle to work together. This often leads to separate game plans. To truly be one flesh, a couple needs to work together as a team. And every team needs to have a goal. Your goal should be to have a loving relationship, not just a lasting one.
But is that the only goal for Jehovah's Witnesses who are married? I think we've just seen in that segment, or we've actually seen the first half of the segment, we've seen that there are many, many goals for married Jehovah's Witnesses that could put a serious strain on the relationship. Look how busy these people are with all of the expectations that the organization, that the congregation demands of them. That part where the notifications were going off, and one of them was Kingdom Hall Maintenance Training Day. So when you're a Jehovah's Witness, you take it in turns on like a group basis. So the congregation gets divided into groups, and each group takes it in turns to clean the Kingdom Hall. Apparently that's not organized enough. They need to have a special day for training people on how to clean the Kingdom Hall. And that's exactly the sort of mind-numbing thing I can remember having to do. You think about being a Jehovah's Witness and you assume it's just going to meetings and doing the preaching work, which is demanding enough. But there's always something extra. There's always some other task that needs to be done. I can remember in my congregation, we used to have this requirement where there was a rota of congregations, and each congregation had to send 2 young men to act as security guards for our assembly hall, and that involved staying up all through the night. So because the organization obviously wasn't going to pay for its own security, and they had an inexhaustible well of volunteers at their disposal, it meant that every now and then I had to just go for an entire night without sleep, because I was one of the people that was doing this, just sitting in a hut next to this assembly hall, trying to amuse myself all through the night, to keep a building safe, to keep some real estate safe. That's the sort of mind-numbing, monotonous stuff that you are expected, demanded in many cases, to do as a Jehovah's Witness. Of course it's going to put a strain on marriages, but quite frankly, if we're talking about the complexities of married life, I'm pretty sure there are marriages that succeed without being in a cult. If anything, I think that being in a cult and the demands of being in a cult will put more strain on a marriage than if the couple were just able to focus on themselves and on getting through life.
When marriage mates aren't teammates, disagreements can turn into fierce competition. To illustrate this point, imagine arguments are like a couple playing tennis against each other. Only one person can win. But if you change your mindset from thinking, what do I want, to what do we want, then you're thinking as a team, and you're able to overcome the problem and win together. Once you have the team mindset, how do you work together as a team practically? Ask Jehovah God for His guidance and to bless your efforts to work together on the issue at hand. As you pray, talk to Jehovah about your shared desire to have a happier marriage. Talk to each other. Discuss your strong points and where you're not so strong, and see where you can better support your partner. Create a plan together that you can both work toward. When you think, what do we want, instead of what do I want? And you pray, discuss your roles, and make a plan, you can have a happy marriage as a team. Take a moment, pause the video, and ask each other these 3 questions. Remember, share your honest feelings and openly express how you both feel.
We can be confident that when we do things Jehovah's way, we'll experience the best results possible.
The best results possible. You'll get the best results possible, apparently, if you're married, if you're a Jehovah's Witness. I mean, goodness knows what's going on in the marriages of the billions of people who aren't Jehovah's Witnesses. They're just in flames, aren't they? That list was interesting. Questions to consider. In what areas of our marriage do we work well as a team? Well, that's going to, I guess, change depending on the couple. And then that second question, in what areas could we improve? I think all Jehovah's Witness couples could improve by getting out of a cult. I'm just going to say it, folks. I mean, that just seems to be the glaring problem. And it made me chuckle when they were showing, again, all of the ritualistic things that Jehovah's Witnesses are expected to do. It showed them doing public witnessing, showed them doing Kingdom Hall maintenance training day, which sounds like tons of fun. And then it showed them playing basketball, and it said Sunday fun day. And I was just watching thinking, what universe is this where Jehovah's Witnesses get to have a fun day on Sunday? Sunday is never a fun day for your typical Jehovah's Witness. I mean, I don't know what the Kingdom Hall kind of congregation sharing schedule is, but usually if a congregation has its own Kingdom Hall, the Sunday is for the meeting. After the meeting, they typically do ministry. So even on a Sunday, which should be a fun day, there's some expectation to get out of bed at the right time when all other families are just enjoying themselves and relaxing. You have to be putting on your suit and tie or putting on your best clothes, making sure you look immaculate, making sure your beard is neatly trimmed, and getting yourself to this Kingdom Hall, and then afterwards you feel really guilty if you're not one of the ones involved in preaching. Maybe it's changed since I was a Jehovah's Witness. Maybe it's not as stressful anymore. But yeah, just a reminder really of, I guess, all of the hurdles and impediments that Jehovah's Witness couples face that certainly don't make it easier to get through a marriage. If anything, they unquestionably make it harder.
So the word had gone out. The expression of God's purpose had gone out. Jacob would take precedence over Esau. Could anyone challenge that? Now, when you consider what God's purpose was, Jacob was the right choice, wasn't it? Because what was God's purpose? It was to set up a nation of worshipers, those who were going to worship Jehovah. Now, between Esau and Jacob, who was most likely to conduct family worship with his children, his offspring? Certainly Jacob. Now, for the first 15 years of their lives, Esau and Jacob could probably have heard Abraham talk about the promise that God had given him, that all of the families of the earth were going to be blessed by means of his offspring. And no doubt Jacob realized what a beautiful privilege it would be to share in the fulfillment of that purpose. Well, Rebekah loved the one Jehovah loved most, Jacob. Isaac loved Esau, even after Esau had married out of the truth twice. Well, some in full-time service have a brother or sister who isn't doing very well in the truth, and yet he or she is the favorite. Go figure. Even parents in the truth don't always love the one Jehovah loves most.
So here we have, in the March 2025 JW Broadcasting episode, David Splane just talking utter nonsense. I mean, it's just a great example of how unhinged the mentality of these men really is when you actually just stop and ponder what they're actually saying. He's just said, go figure, regarding the possibility of parents having a favorite among their children who is not taking the truth or Jehovah's Witness worship as seriously. And he says, go figure. What a weird thing to bring up, that this is a problem. This is enough of a problem in the organization of children who don't take the organization seriously being preferred by their parents. This is enough of a problem for him to mention it in his morning worship and say, go figure. And then towards the beginning, you have David Splane talking about Jacob and Esau, characters obviously in the Old Testament, and talking about which of the two would have been more likely to do family worship.
Now, between Esau and Jacob, who was most likely to conduct family worship with his children, his offspring?
I mean, really, this is the sort of thing Jehovah's Witnesses need to be thinking about characters in the Bible getting together on a weekly basis to do a ritual that Jehovah's Witnesses do now in the 20th and 21st centuries. But on what basis can we say that this would have been done in patriarchal times in the Bible? I mean, putting aside the fact that there's no historical or archaeological evidence for the story of the patriarchs in the Pentateuch, putting that to one side, what's David Splane's basis for insisting that the patriarchs conducted family worship in the same way that Jehovah's Witnesses do in the modern age? The man is just speaking gibberish. Then he talks about Esau twice marrying out of the truth.
Isaac loved Esau, even after Esau had married out of the truth twice.
Here David Splane is complaining that Esau married out of the truth, which means it's an expression that's used by Jehovah's Witnesses for if someone gets married to someone who isn't a Jehovah's Witness. There weren't any Jehovah's Witnesses for Esau to marry back then. These are patriarchal times. The clue is in the word patriarch. In other words, a family. This is pre-Nation of Israel. So God is communicating, if you take the Old Testament story seriously, God is interested purely in a family and in a lineage. And if it's a family and you're looking for a potential marriage mate, your only choice, if you don't want to commit incest, is to marry outside of your family. I feel like I'm going crazy even just having to explain this. How can David impose the Jehovah's Witness model of family worship and of not marrying outside of the truth on the patriarchal system that's described in the Old Testament? It just beggars belief that a man who can spew such unabashed nonsense could be heralded as a wise and esteemed part of the faithful and discreet slave.
Would it be possible for us to get in the way when Jehovah decides to do something, or when he approves a project that maybe we don't agree with? It could happen. The organization suggests a new way to carry out the preaching work. We tell our service group, that'll never work here. Maybe it'll work somewhere else, but not here. We're different. What about our building projects? Ramapo? Why do we need Ramapo? Armageddon's coming. In the late 40s, when the decision was made to expand world headquarters at 124 Columbia Heights, a few of the brothers took a dim view. Why spend the time and the money so close to the end? Then in 1953, at the business meeting of the Watchtower Society, Brother Noah read a letter from a sister. Now, just for context, this is 1953. And in those days, as I well recall, some thought that Armageddon was going to come 40 years from 1914. We were doing a lot of counting back then. So this sister writes to Brother Noah and says, why are you spending all this money on building projects when Armageddon could come in 1954? Well, if we'd listened to her and others like her, where would we be today? Still back at 124 Columbia Heights. Speaking about our building programs, Brother Noah once made a very profound statement. It's simple, but it's profound. He said, we're going to keep building. Let Jehovah stop it if he doesn't agree with it. I think he could do that, couldn't he?
Where do we even begin with this? Where do we even begin? So David Splain is here criticizing Jehovah's Witnesses, who quite rightly say, why are we devoting ourselves to long-term projects, long-term building projects, for real estate and that kind of thing, if we are literally in, as Stephen Lett puts it, the last of the last days? If we're truly in the last of the last days, why the need for long-term building projects? Why not just consolidate what we have? It's very clearly a paradox, the way the organization goes about doing things. It's almost as though they don't fully believe that Armageddon is truly just around the corner. And to counter this preposterous thinking, this negativity that David Splain clearly finds repulsive, what he does is he gives an example that demonstrates just how foolish the doomsday thinking of Jehovah's Witnesses is, and he can't see it. He's so lacking in, I'm just going to say it, in intelligence and in self-awareness, that when David Splain was planning this presentation, this is a morning worship presentation that he's giving in front of Bethelites. He's writing down what he's going to say, and he can't see in his own notes that he is exposing the futility of the entire theology. Because he's just admitted that in the late 1940s, they thought the end was close. And he gives a year which even I didn't know about. And I've done a video about the many, many predictions of Jehovah's Witnesses for Armageddon. Thumbnail here if you want to have a look. Even I didn't know about the year 1954, so that's a new one on me. So thank you, David Splain, for further emphasizing my point that for decades, this organization has been in the business of peddling dates for Armageddon, and they've just been and gone, been and gone, been and gone. Guess why? Because Armageddon isn't coming. All I can say is, if you are one of Jehovah's Witnesses, watch this video. Watch it again if you need to. Watch it however many times you need to. And just do the math, as David Splain is fond of saying. And just think about what this means. Just imagine in another 40, 50, 60, 70 years from now, you can just imagine a governing body member saying exactly the same thing. So in 2074, they could be saying, oh, well, you know, this isn't new, this negative thinking, this questioning about whether the end's coming. We had the same advice from Brother Splain all the way back in 2025, or whenever this was recorded. He did a wonderful morning worship about Ramapo, and we all remember Ramapo, don't we? It's not hard to imagine that happening in the distant future, is it? At all. It's so sad, because it's always the organization that benefits from this unmet expectation that they're constantly hyping up, of this Armageddon that's never coming. This Armageddon that means that conveniently for them, they need the time and energy of their millions of followers to help them build a real estate empire. How convenient that Armageddon means that they need to build stuff that's worth something using volunteer labor. How convenient, David Splain. But how tragic that no one actually stops and puts two and two together and thinks, hang on a minute, this is like a broken record. I've heard this story before.
Now, sometimes a body of elders has a lively discussion about some project or initiative. Maybe it's the need for a new kingdom hall. And we may have our concerns. We may have reservations. We express those. But if a number of spirit-directed men are enthusiastically in favor of a project, it's very possible that Jehovah agrees with it too. So we wouldn't want to get in the way. And we wouldn't want to be a naysayer. You know, sometimes what happens when we're in a building project, we have a trouble with permitting. We can't get the permits we need right away. Or maybe a building inspector comes and he causes a lot of trouble. And we wouldn't want to be the type of person who says, well, this project mustn't have Jehovah's blessing, because if it had Jehovah's blessing, everything would go smoothly. Tell that to Nehemiah and the Jews in his day. They had no end of trouble, and yet what they were doing had Jehovah's approval. The Word of God is alive and exerts power. When Jehovah has a purpose, we see what we can do to advance that purpose. And if there's nothing we can do, we pray for it, and then we get out of the way.
Yes, get out of the way is the message for Jehovah's Witnesses when it comes to projects that have been prayed for. You definitely need to get out of the way if you are, as David Splain puts it, a naysayer who has beef with the organization because you don't agree with something that the organization is doing. Very revealing talk that David Splain has given, not just in this part, but also in the previous parts of the same talk, where he was babbling on about Jacob and Esau and postulating about whether they did family worship or married, talking about whether they were marrying in or out of the truth. The stuff about Ramapo, again, very revealing, where he's laying it out on the table and making my argument for me in explaining that the organization has been on tenterhooks for Armageddon for decades. Well, isn't that precisely the point? Armageddon isn't coming. When are you going to accept that? And now he's making, towards the end of his morning worship, a very clear criticism of any who question the direction of the organization. Interesting how he made this claim that when you have a majority of, as he puts it, spirit-directed elders who make a decision, probably that decision is true. It's kind of true by default.
If a number of spirit-directed men are enthusiastically in favor of a project, it's very possible that Jehovah agrees with it too.
I'm not sure I could agree with that. I can think of many examples where a majority decision could be wrong. I think it's manifestly obvious, it's self-evident that a consensus can be flawed. But David Splain apparently doesn't think so. David Splain believes that if it's a majority of elders all feeling a certain way, they must have automatically have arrived at the right thing to do. But he really doesn't have much time for anybody who gets in the way of theocratic projects or theocratic direction. Anybody who takes issue with specific advice is a troublemaker. Interesting language that he used about building inspectors.
Or maybe a building inspector comes and he causes a lot of trouble.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but a building inspector's job is to make sure that a building is both safe and being built according to the law. So if a building inspector is causing you trouble, that's not the building inspector's fault. That's your fault for either not building your building safely or building it in such a way that hasn't been agreed. In other words, building it illegally. So that was very interesting language that David Splain was using. Apparently, the organization just expects everybody to let them do whatever they want to do, including building inspectors, including local authorities. Everyone just needs to just stand aside and let the organization build its real estate empire as it wishes without causing them any trouble. Fascinating insight into the way David Splain's muddled mind works in this remarkable morning worship.
This month's music video gives us something else to look forward to. Life on a paradise earth. It's called It Won't Be Long.
When I look at this world and the days we're in, the time is reduced, it is clear, my friend, yes I know. Oh, it won't be long. So I try my best to do what is right, to make Jehovah the purpose in my life, 'cause I know, oh, it won't be long. And I will wake up tomorrow and life will be new. The kingdom has come and forever its rule over us will bring peace. It won't be long. Friends and loved ones we're welcoming back. Pain and sorrow is all in the past. Yes, I know. Jehovah's will be done in all the earth. It won't be long. Even if I don't get to see this old world pass away, safe I know I will be in Jehovah's memory. And I will wake up tomorrow and life will be new. The kingdom has come and forever its rule over us will bring peace. It won't
Well, that's a relief. It won't be long. It's just around the corner, of course. Armageddon, which of course will give way to paradise. And this fact is celebrated in the March 2025 JW Broadcasting episode. They always have this kind of incredibly cringeworthy, cheesy music video towards the end. This was the video for this month, and just to give you some context, we see there the elderly gentleman towards the beginning of the video. I've spared you all of it. Towards the beginning of the video, we see him as a child. And so the point here is that he's grown into an old man who has physical impairments, and he's spent his entire life waiting for Armageddon. And now all he can do is kind of sit and paint the paradise and do phone witnessing and do what he can in the organization. And even towards the end, there's like a bridge where it talks in the lyrics, where it talks about how, well, even if you don't survive to see Armageddon, which is going to be the case, I'm afraid, for everybody.
Even if I don't get to see this old world pass away, safe I know I will be in Jehovah's memory.
I mean, Armageddon itself, if we're talking about a global situation where the earth is no longer able to sustain human life, I mean, that's always possible. But this, just to be clear, if you're watching this as one of Jehovah's Witnesses, I just want you to kind of really think about this. There will not be a time when a bunch of Kenny Rogers clones are going to descend from heaven on heavenly horses, wielding heavenly bows and arrows, to destroy humanity, to destroy 8 billion or 9 billion people, to make way for a world where only Jehovah's Witnesses are allowed to populate the planet, joined by people being resurrected from all periods in history so that they can get the privilege of becoming Jehovah's Witnesses. That's just a fantasy. It's never going to happen. So everybody is going to, who spends their lives as Jehovah's Witnesses, is going to face this situation where they close their eyes and never wake up, and they've just exhausted their entire lives waiting for this Armageddon that's never coming. The whole point of this music video is to drill home this message: it won't be long. Well, isn't that what generations of Jehovah's Witnesses, many of whom have long since died, were all persuaded to believe? Anyway, those were my thoughts on the March 2025 JW Broadcasting episode. Hopefully you found this video interesting. Don't forget that you can subscribe to the Lloyd Evans channel for similar videos. I do just want to give a quick shout out to my hundreds of patrons and YouTube channel members who are able to pledge monthly to keep this channel going. It's them that make it possible for me to create this content. And if you are in a position to join them and help out, there are some links below in the description. But whether you're a patron, a YouTube channel member, or just a subscriber, just someone who's passing through, I hope you found my content entertaining and informative. But that's all I have time for. Thank you so much for watching.